Rated T for teen.
Hey everyone, it's the best in the world, CM Punk, back to shake up WWE 2K26. This year, the show never stops. You're running the greatest spectacle on earth with the biggest roster we've ever had. Over 400 superstars and legends from every era. Stack the tables, break the rules, burn it all down. And yeah, my very own showcase, telling my story the way it should have been told. Because when the show never stops, anything is possible. Available March 13th, pre-order now.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi!
Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome to your personal briefing. The full court press is on the air.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Welcome back to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. Good Sunday morning to you. As promised, I've got some new poll numbers. Well, I don't have them. I've got the man who has them. Brent Buchanan is the president of Signal Polling, one of the most accurate pollsters in the nation. They were the go-to firm for so many media outlets looking to know where the numbers really were. Brent, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. I have always dreamt on being on WABC, considering how historic the station is. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to the audience here.
Box checked. Thank John Catsimatidis for that. Anyway, look, tell me where we are. Let's just start. You guys, the first thing you always look at is the generic ballot. Where are the Republicans versus the Democrats? Where do the two parties stand? What are we? Hold on. So this is March. What is it? I'm sorry. I went to public school math. So what is this? 8 months out of the midterms. Where are we?
Well, we're not as in bad of a spot as Republicans as the doom scrolling media might lead you to believe. We're also not in an amazing spot. So, one of the jobs we get hired to do is to guide campaigns and caucuses and political parties and how do you get to where you want to go? And we are not where we want to go yet, but there are paths to it. It is a little bit of an uphill battle at this point, but we also have to take into account we're the governing party. We are the status quo. That is what happens when you're in charge. You get viewed as the status quo. And so we have to calibrate how are we going to win against this. And our starting point is we're down about 4 points to the Democrats on what's called the generic congressional ballot. And so that is not a named ballot. That is just simply asking everybody in the country, if you had to pick the R or pick the D, are you putting on the red or the blue jersey? And as we look at independents on that, we're down with independents, but we're almost always down with independents. It is very rare, even in 22, when we won the House, we were down with independents. So that is not something that is drastic and out of touch. The second thing we look at environmentally is the right direction, wrong track. So do people feel like things are getting better, they're getting worse, or they're staying about the same? And our data shows, because we do this every month, you can go to our website, cygn.al, and pull this up month by month and see the data. We actually showed things were way worse in December than they are today. Albeit our survey started right around the time that we began pummeling Iran. And I'll be very interested to see what our April data shows with gas prices rising. But there's not a lot that's changed about the fundamentals of what this midterm is going to look like.
Okay, so I always tell people, and again, I appreciate that this is like me telling a doctor, and I say that because I've had first aid training in sixth grade. So I hate saying this to a pollster, but for people out there, one of the things I always say as a political practitioner is that a poll is a snapshot. So if you took a picture of two people going down a highway, you see where they are, but you don't know, is the car on the right overtaking the car on the left, or is it falling behind on the car on the left? Meaning context matters. So you said we're 4 points down on the generic ballot. I think you guys had it at 49-45. But take that snapshot photo and add some context. Are we better than we were the month before and the month before that? Are we worse? And where are the Democrats?
Yeah, great question. The true value of polling is looking at it over time, which is why if you go look at our decks, we go all the way back to January 24 and showing you each month by month data point on this. So if we're looking at that, we have slipped slightly, still better than November. when the New Jersey and Virginia elections occurred and we got walloped. We're better than that, but we're not as good as we were last month. But we're talking fractions of a percent changes. And that's something that I think that mainstream media people don't take into account, is that elections don't swing 5 points. That just doesn't happen. We're too polarized of a country to see massive 5, 7, even 2 and 3 point swings. It's why if you ever see a survey that says Republicans have shifted multiple points on the generic ballot or on the presidential ballot, just throw it out. It's worthless because things don't move like that.
What if next month? Because would you say that's true if like a massive worldly event like this Iran incursion? I mean, like in other words, sometimes isn't it plausible that a big event going to war or oil prices going through the roof could affect a swing, though?
I think it can, but we have to take human psychology into account on this. And costs are not the only input in somebody's electoral decision. And it's why, and I put this in my book, I lead with this in my book. Everybody remembers the ad, Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you. We did not have a problem with tens of millions of transgendered prisoners getting sex changes funded by taxpayers, but that is the number one ad that got more money spent behind it than anything else in the 24 presidential election cycle. And I bring that up as the fact that no one input is going to drive an outcome in a political election. The second that war becomes an issue and maybe costs go up, then you also have safety and security concerns, and you see national security rise as an issue. You might see immigration drop as an issue. We are, you said it when we started, 8 months away from the election. That is a literal political eternity away right now. So if the Iran war is still going on strong in September and oil is $250 a barrel, we have a different conversation. I don't foresee those things happening. And so you also can't react to every small movement within the surveys. You got to calibrate the things that have sustaining trend to them that need addressed. And it's too early to say what that is going to be here. But based on the fact that Americans and the media that drives a lot of that has very short attention spans, I'm not concerned at this point.
Okay, I had the opportunity to sit down with President Trump on Friday for a little bit, and I'm not going to reveal any of the private conversations, but I will say this. He fully appreciates and understands the political nature of what's happening. So that brings me to my second question. Everybody looks at the doom and gloom. What happens if oil prices keep going up? What happens if... I think he has a recognition of the political perils that exist. The guy's very smart politically. So conversely, let's just say that he does a bunch of things within his purview to bring oil prices down, whether the war comes to a complete, conclusion or not. Let's just, because he has a bunch of tools. If oil prices go back down, Brent Buchanan, does the polling then reflect, will it shift? In other words, I get right now, if you ask a lot of people, right down the street from me, gas hit basically $4 a gallon on Friday. Yeah, Friday morning is when it hit up. So, I guess what I'm asking is, I get when churn happens, some people are going to feel unease and they might tell a pollster, I don't know. Conversely, if things get better quickly because the war ends or the president addresses through some kind of policy ways to bring the price down, will he benefit? Will things spring back?
They will, but not at the same pace at which they spiked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And much of this is also incumbent on how is Trump contrasting us with the Democrats?
That's where I was going.
When you are the status quo, you have to present what the alternative is to the status quo, and that has to be worse than the status quo. But that is incumbent on Republicans to make that case, on Trump more than anybody else to make that case. He has the biggest bullhorn.
So, in other words, I think the opposition party, the minority party, in this case, the Democrats, wants this to be a referendum. We on the Republican side want it to be a choice. That being said, my understanding is the favorability of Democrats right now is not high.
Exactly. You are currently experiencing in the polling a reflexive opposition to Trump, but not a positive towards Democrats. Their image, I was just digging into this data this morning, right in my daily article. Democrats are 56% unfavorable in Congress among all midterm voters. Republicans are 55% unfavorable. That is not a positive choice that somebody is making at this point, which is why we have to prosecute the case, because the gravitational pull around replacing the status quo is strong anywhere.
So when we look at a top line number, in this case, 49-45, that's the generic ballot. But obviously people like you dig in and say, okay, well, it's like a doctor. Okay, you got a pain. Okay, let's feel around. Let's see where it really hurts. Where is the pain electorally? I know there's a bunch of subgroups. For example, you've got this subset that you guys call swing voters. Where are they, and what does that portend for the midterms?
Great question. So right now, swing voters, which we have as a group of people that are not fully with the Republican, not fully with the Democrat, or they're undecided, because nobody can tell you, hey, I'm a swing voter. So we use that as the proxy, and it's tied, highly undecided, as you would expect, but tied. That has shifted from that group leaned more Republican. So this growth that both parties saw in their generic ballot standing from February to March, a few more people sorted into the Democratic column from the swing voter column. But if we're looking to diagnose what is the larger problem that Republicans have to address and where are the opportunities, it is almost exclusively with voters under the age of 55. I just did an analysis this weekend looking at our exit polling that we have of 9,000 people who voted in the 2024 presidential election. What vote choice did they make? Harris, Trump, or a third party? And then where are those demographic groups today on the generic ballot? 100% of the delta to the negative from where we ended the presidential race to where we are today comes from voters under the age of 55. Secondly,
wow.
It comes,
and that was a group that he did well with.
Yes. And he could probably say he's in the White House because of voters under the age of 55 and non-college voters. Huge voter base for the Republicans over the last 20 years has become the base for Republicans. And there's been a good bit of erosion among those folks. From a geographic standpoint, it's the suburbs and the rural areas. Republicans have improved in more urban areas, which is kind of counterintuitive. But that is who Republicans need to be focused on right now. They need to be asking themselves, what does this mean for a voter under the age of 55? That needs to be the lens under which everything is filtered right now for Republicans.
And I know you and I have talked about in the past on the Sean Spicer Show, which obviously everyone can watch every day on YouTube on my channel, as well as The Huddle. You identified single white women as a major red flag for issues. Is that still a problem?
Yes, a huge problem. I think one of the data points you're talking about is we asked folks if it was okay to break the law if you didn't like what ICE was doing. And upper 60% of young liberal women said that was okay, when 70+% of the country said, no, that is not okay to do. This particular voter group is about as radically outside the mainstream of any voter group on either side of the aisle.
You also talk about, I'm looking at the data here that you guys have at Signal, and it says 18 to 29-year-olds break 64 to 31 Democrat on the generic ballot, but they view Democrats net unfavorably by a 4-point margin. In other words, they might vote Democrat, but they don't like them. You and I have talked about this in the past. When you say Republicans or the president need to go out there and make the case, what does that mean? Where do they make the case? How do they make the case?
Not on ABC Nightly News, because if you are an under 55-year-old watching ABC Nightly News, you're a weird person, or you're a liberal. Those are your two options, or I repeat myself. So we have to go where President Trump went in the 24 election. We've got to get on these long-form podcasts and authentically have hard conversations. That's what younger folks are looking for. They do not trust institutions. They are highly skeptical of almost anything. And to present yourself in a raw, authentic, long-form way is how we build trust back with these people. The individuals who say that is the types of podcasts, YouTube channels, social media, people who tell us that is where they get their information. They were positive for us in the presidential election. They are currently negative for us. And if you watch broadcast or cable, your opinion really hasn't changed between the two elections. So this is not just a messaging problem, it is a medium problem.
And so that's the thing. So we got to remember the platforms in the medium, like you're saying, but it's also like, I think, how we're communicating, if that makes sense. I feel like too many times people are like, they want to dance around like affordability or whatever, as opposed to saying, hey, we're working hard, we have somewhere to go for. Brent, I don't think it's that different than an employee, right? If your employee comes to you and you say, is the job done? Well, no, but I've made progress on these 3 fronts. I'm working towards the end. I'll have an answer for you on Tuesday. I feel like, okay, good. And I think too often Republicans just like to pretend that, we worked on the job, we passed the housing bill or whatever fill in the blank bill, as if that was the only way to solve it, and we're not continuing down the path of making progress for you.
How people feel about where things are today is based on what has been done. Elections are decided on what will be done. And you cannot say, we told you we would do 10 things, we did 10 things, reelect us. That is helpful, but it cannot be the only leg you stand on. You need the other leg, the more important one, which is saying, and here's what we are going to continue to do for you. Here's what we're going to stop from happening that's currently happening, and you hate it. I'm going to make that thing you hate go away. You always have to be pointing to the future. I wrote about this in my book, America's Emotional Divide, talking through the how. How do we talk about these things? And it is meeting somebody where they are. You can't come in and say, the country is doing amazing and costs are coming down and wages are rising if somebody is terrified about their future. They're not going to hear you until you say, I get that things are scary out there right now and a lot of change is happening.
You guys wrote in your
that simple of acknowledging.
Yeah, no, I get it. Again, it's like hey, I'm working hard. I'm going to keep going. Most people get that message. If you tell them the job is done, right? I mean, my dad used to do this when I mowed the lawn. I'd say, oh, I did it. And he'd look out and he'd be like, that's not done. Like, get back out there, right? And because he could see clearly that I hadn't done a really good job and I was trying to sell it, as opposed to, hey, I'm working on it. I'll be done in an hour. Okay, good. Keep going. You can't expect people to see what they see with their own eyes and tell them it's something different, which is what Biden did. But I want to ask you this. You guys have a really interesting nugget in the data that I see at in the Signal polling memo here, where it says the SAVE Act is the best wedge issue. Americans broadly support the SAVE Act by a 20-point margin. So are we messaging this right? Is this just Democrats being obstructionists, or are we not messaging it right?
We're not contrasting it. We're saying that there's a problem and this is a solution to it, but we're not saying what the other side believes about it and how outside the mainstream that is. Like, nobody believes that you shouldn't have to show an ID to vote. Well, there are hard partisan Democrats that believe that, but normal people and folks who are in the middle believe you should have to show an ID to vote, that you should have to be a citizen in order to register to vote. Those are very common sense ideas. And the reason it's such a wedge issue is because the other side of that issue is so narrow in who actually believes it. And it's like the transgendered prisoner sex change thing. There are some people who believe it. It's a really small segment of folks. And then there's everybody else. And we need these types of issues, but we have to prosecute that case with the voters and contrast it in a way where it is super clear. Republicans have this common sense approach to ensure that your vote will count and not be canceled out by an illegal alien or somebody who is claiming to be another person and voting more than one time. Like, we can't afford that to happen. The Democrats are in the way. They want that to happen. They are fine with that.
Yeah, I get it, and that's, I just can't believe that it's not, considering the popularity of it, that and the ridiculousness of the Dems side. That it's
because we got squishy Republicans in the Senate. That's our problem.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Last thing I want to ask you, I got about 30 seconds left. President's making the case, largely that Iran is a threat, that they had a nuclear weapon. Does that message sell?
It sells for those who were already in our camp. The threat is so far away and they haven't seen the problem with it. Here's the real issue. For 47 years, nobody had the guts to do anything that Donald Trump just had the guts to do. And there are some repercussions for dealing with a 47-year-old problem.
Okay. I get it. And that's why, again, so much of this stuff, maybe I'm just, I think so much of this comes back to messaging, getting out there, selling it, going to the right places, because I think we're right on the issues. Anyway, Brent Buchanan, Signal polling, all of the information that we found, guys, that we just talked about is available on Signal's website, and it's cygn.al. cygn.al. Brent Buchanan, thanks for being with us. We'll have you back soon. You guys are listening to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. I will be right back here on WABC.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
Sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation
On 77 WABC.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.